When I bought the old cedar farmhouse on Lake Elm, I didn't think I was buying a war zone. It was supposed to be my peaceful retirement place. After 35 years working as a civil engineer, designing highways and dealing with bureaucrats who thought asphalt could fix everything, I just wanted silence, some fishing, and a porch to sit on with my wife, Marie. We were done with homeowners associations, lawn rules, and nosy neighbors telling us which kind of flowers we could plant. The property wasn't huge, just under 3 acres, but it had one thing that money couldn't buy anymore: privacy. On one side was a small wooded stretch. On the other, an old wooden fence that marked the edge of an HOA community called Lake Elm Estates. The houses over there were beautiful, no doubt. Pristine lawns, identical mailboxes, and perfect driveways. But every inch screamed control. I could almost hear the sound of a gavel echoing in their homeowners' meetings. The realtor had laughed when I asked how the HOA was. "Oh, you're safe," she said. "You're just outside their jurisdiction. But don't let them think otherwise." I didn't understand what she meant until I met Karen. The first time I saw her, I thought she was just a friendly neighbor. She marched right up my driveway, her designer sandals kicking up dust, a clipboard in hand. "Hi there. You must be the new homeowner," she said with a wide, almost predatory smile. I nodded. "That's right. I'm Paul. My wife and I just moved in last week." "Well, welcome to the neighborhood," she said, but her eyes flicked over the peeling paint and the gravel drive. "I'm Karen Matthews, president of the Lake Elm Estates HOA. We like to keep our area neat and tidy. I'll bring you the bylaws later." I chuckled politely. "Oh, no need. I'm not part of the HOA. This property's outside your boundary." The smile faltered. "Excuse me?" "Yep," I said. "Bought it precisely because of that." For a split second, her face twisted like she'd bitten a lemon. "That can't be right," she said finally. "This was part of Lake Elm Estates before the road was extended. I'm sure it's still in our jurisdiction." I shrugged. "You can check the county plat map. My deed's clean, not HOA property." She stood there, frozen, eyes narrowing as if trying to rewrite reality. "Well, we'll see about that," she muttered before stomping back toward her perfect little neighborhood. A week later, we got our first violation notice taped to our gate. Violation: unapproved exterior color scheme. Penalty: $250 fine. I actually laughed out loud. Marie didn't. "Paul," she said, "what is wrong with these people?" "Nothing a map can't fix," I said, pulling out the plat survey. I drove straight to the HOA office, a little rented room near the lake, and dropped the papers on the front desk. Karen was there in a power suit, surrounded by a few of her board members. "Mrs. Matthews," I said calmly, "you find the wrong guy. My property isn't under your authority. Here's the deed, the county zoning, and a nice little boundary line that proves it." She looked at the papers, then at me, and smiled that same fake smile again. "You can't just opt out of community standards, Mr. Thompson." "Actually," I said, "I can, because I never opted in." Her lips thinned. "You'll regret being difficult." A month later, we discovered what she meant. First, the mail started disappearing. Packages would go missing. Then we got anonymous notes in our mailbox. "Your property is dragging down our neighborhood's value." One night, someone threw a bag of trash over our fence. Marie cried. I installed cameras. I could have called the police, but I didn't want to fight. I'd dealt with enough stubborn personalities in my life to know that confrontation often feeds them. So I just stayed polite, firm, and factual, until the day I came home from town and found her car in my driveway. Karen stood there, hands on hips, directing 2 young men as they unloaded boxes from a moving truck. "What on God's green earth are you doing?" I asked, parking and stepping out. She looked at me like I was a trespasser. "Well, since you decided to ignore the HOA and let this house fall into disrepair, we've decided to take matters into our own hands. You're in violation of multiple community standards, so we're reclaiming the property." I laughed, thinking it was some twisted joke. "You're reclaiming my home?" "Yes," she said, her voice deadly serious. "The board voted. You've left us no choice." I pointed to the road. Karen, my property line starts 40 feet before your development. You can't reclaim something you never owned. Her face flushed bright red. This is community property. You can't just live here without contributing. Marie, bless her, came out onto the porch. Paul, what's going on? Apparently, I said, we've been evicted by people who don't own the land. That's when Karen screamed, "You're trespassing on our land," and dialed 911. When the sheriff arrived, I almost felt bad for him. He was a young guy, maybe 30, and looked caught between amusement and disbelief. "Sir," he said, "she's claiming this is HOA property." "Then she's mistaken," I said, handing him my deed and county plat map. "This property predates the HOA by 20 years. You can verify with the assessor's office." Karen folded her arms. "That's not true. This house was part of our neighborhood until they built that access road." The deputy studied the papers, then looked at her. "Ma'am, this is in your HOA. Not even close." She went pale, then furious. "You're making a mistake." The deputy sighed. "No, ma'am. You are. You can't move into someone else's home. You need to leave. Now." She screamed, actually screamed, like a kettle about to explode. "This is a disgrace. He's lying. You're all blind." Her two helpers slowly backed away and got into the truck. She stayed, ranting and shaking, until the sheriff physically guided her off the property. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next morning, I found my gate padlocked from the outside. Someone had chained it shut. Karen, of course, denied everything, but the camera footage told a different story. She had done it herself at 2 a.m., wearing gloves and muttering something about protecting community assets. That's when I called my lawyer, an old friend named George. He took one look at the footage and said, "Paul, this is textbook harassment. Let's file for restraining order." We did. When the notice was served, I watched from my truck as Karen read the papers in her pristine front yard. Her face went white, then purple. She threw the envelope on the ground, stomped on it, and screamed loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear. "You'll regret this. You'll all regret this." The next few weeks were quiet. Too quiet. Then the HOA board called a special meeting. I was invited as a guest. I went mostly out of curiosity. They held it in a small community center, the kind with beige carpet and bad coffee. Karen wasn't there. Her vice president, a nervous man named Todd, was running things. He looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. "Mr. Thompson," he began, "we wanted to apologize for the misunderstanding. Mrs. Matthews has taken a leave of absence." I nodded. Probably wise. He cleared his throat. "We also wanted to ask if you consider joining the HOA voluntarily. It might ease tensions." I smiled. "Todd, I moved out here to escape people like Karen. You all seem nice enough, but I'm fine on my own side of the fence." He nodded. "Understood. For what it's worth, we've had issues with her before. You're not the first." That was the first honest thing anyone from that HOA had said to me. A few months passed, and life finally settled into what it should have been from the start. Quiet mornings, coffee on the porch, the smell of pine and lake water drifting through the air. Then one morning, as I was trimming the hedges near the fence, I saw a for sale sign going up in front of Karen's house. She'd finally been voted out, according to one of the neighbors. Apparently, she tried to fine half the neighborhood for improper Christmas decor. The HOA had had enough. A week later, her moving truck pulled away. She glared at my house one last time, rolled up the window, and drove off without a word. Marie and I stood on our porch, watching the taillights disappear. "You think that's the last we'll see of her?" she asked. "I sure hope so," I said. But fate wasn't done yet. 2 months later, we got a letter from the county clerk's office, a formal complaint filed by none other than Karen Matthews. She'd accused us of illegal occupation of community property. She was trying one last time to claim ownership of our land. George laughed when he saw it. "This woman's relentless," he said. "Let's end it properly." We filed a countersuit for harassment, legal fees, and damages. The case dragged for months. Karen represented herself. Bad idea. And came to court armed with a binder full of photocopied HOA bylaws that didn't apply to me. The judge looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. When my turn came, I simply handed over the original 1963 plat map, the deed, and photos showing the boundary fence built long before the HOA even existed. The judge sighed, looked at Karen, and said, "Mrs. Matthews, this property was never part of your HOA. The Thompson's deed is valid. Case dismissed. And frankly, if you file anything else against them, you'll face contempt charges." Her jaw dropped. She sputtered something about community harmony and declining standards, but the bailiff was already showing her out. After that, peace returned for good. Marie and I spent our evenings watching the sun dip over the lake, the water turning gold in the twilight. Sometimes we'd see the reflection of those HOA houses across the fence. Perfect lawns, perfect symmetry. But behind that perfection, I knew there was chaos. I'd learned something important through it all. Sometimes control isn't about order. It's about fear. People like Karen can't stand what they can't control. And when you live your life trying to dominate others, peace becomes impossible. Freedom, I realized, doesn't come from rules or regulations. It comes from knowing where your boundaries truly lie and having the courage to defend them, even if it means standing alone. A few months later, we got new neighbors in Karen's old house. A young couple with kids, friendly, humble, and quick to laugh. They waved over the fence and brought us cookies their first week. Marie smiled. "You think it's over now?" I nodded. "Yeah, this time, I think we finally have good neighbors." We sat on the porch as the evening settled in. Cicadas humming in the trees, the lake shimmering calm and free. And for the first time in years, I felt exactly where I was meant to be.